by the 2 legions of Cassius Longinus, the Roman governor of the region. But the 10,000 legionaries were heavily outnumbered and crushed by the slave army.
I think it's quite easy to see, in hindsight, that the Romans grossly underestimated Spartacus and his forces.
Since the revolt began, Spartacus had not lost a single battle. He must have thought no one could stop him. He had not counted on his own army. The Alps and freedom were now a short march away, but when he urged his army on, they refused to go any further. They hadn't lost a single battle. Now they wanted to stay and ravage Italy. Reluctantly, he turned his army, now nearly 100,000 strong, and headed south. Rome shuddered at the thought that their slaves were now their masters on the battlefield.
The nightmare, of course, is the enemy within. These people are literally in your own house, in your own rooms, taking care of you. It really is the idea that the enemy is all around you, and this must have had a tremendously corrosive effect upon people's sense of security.
At that very moment, Rome decided that only a large army and a determined general could stop Spartacus. 6 new legions were added to the 4 already in Italy, 50,000 men. Marcus Crassus was given command. Ruthlessly ambitious and fabulously wealthy, he saw the defeat of Spartacus as the way to political power. Now was the time to make his mark.
Crassus surrounded himself with his friends, his allies politically. He wanted people to know how successful he was going to be. And he was determined to be very successful.
Crassus shadowed the slave army as it moved south. He planned to keep Spartacus moving south and then hem him in, down on the heel of Italy.
Spartacus is wandering up and down Italy, north of Rome, south of Rome. Quite extraordinary, the geographical range, the freedom. So Crassus got to pin the guy down.
He instructed his commanders to avoid battle. But one of them, Mummius, could not resist the chance for glory. He sent his 2 legions against Spartacus, just south of Naples. Once again, the slaves and gladiators inflicted heavy casualties and sent the Romans off in humiliating defeat. Crassus was furious. The defeated soldiers suffered a terrible punishment, decimation. Crassus chose a cohort of soldiers who had fought badly and made an example of them. 480 men. They were lined up, and every 10th soldier was stabbed or beaten to death by his own comrades.
We're told that this improved the morale of the other Roman forces, which tells us something about the way the Romans thought about war, as well as about the ruthlessness of Crassus.
Presumably, it focused the attention of the others on their next battle.
The Roman soldiers realized they had more to fear from their commanders than the enemy, and discipline was restored. The Roman legions tracked Spartacus as he moved further and further south. By the beginning of 71 BC, Spartacus was in Bruttium, in the toe of Italy. But he was determined not to be pinned in there by Crassus. He planned to board ship and sail to Sicily, where there was a large slave population. Safety was just 5 miles away. But Crassus was hot on his heels and determined to wipe out the slave army once and for all. 71 BC, the Roman general Crassus has Spartacus and his slave army cornered in the heel of Italy. The only ships available to Spartacus were owned by pirates from Cilicia in southern Turkey. They had promised to take him and his army to Sicily. Somewhere around here, he waited and waited, but they never came. Betrayed by the pirates, some of the men tried building rafts. they were useless against the strong currents. Sicily is just right over there, 5 miles across the straits. But to Spartacus, it must have seemed a world away. Now Crassus closed in, with an army of 32,000 men. He ordered his troops to build a ditch and a wall across Bruttium, from one coast to the other. It was 40 miles long. When it was completed, Spartacus was trapped. But Rome did not place all her hopes in Crassus. The great general Pompey had won many victories in Spain. Now, he and his legions were recalled back to Italy. And another general, Lucullus, was sailing with his army from Macedonia and would soon land at Brundisium. Crassus would have preferred to starve out Spartacus over the winter, but Pompey was on his way back to Italy. If he did not win a quick victory, Pompey might march against Spartacus, and Crassus's chance for glory would be gone. Spartacus, too, saw that it was now or never. He tried to negotiate with Crassus, but he refused. In defiance, Spartacus had a captured legionary crucified in full view of the Roman camp. The slave army that had never been defeated now had its back against the wall. Spartacus had to break out. He led his troops in several ferocious attacks on the Roman lines. At last, he managed to break through, but with only 1/3 of his men. He could not escape by sea and had no choice but to head north. Crassus followed and attacked Spartacus again. The gladiators knew that they had to win or die. They were defeated, and 12,000 lost their lives.
One of the things we see again and again is that Rome's opponents do better when they do not fight fixed battles. Spartacus was a great guerrilla leader, but if he had to fight in a formal military context, his slaves simply didn't have the discipline to confront a Roman legion.
Spartacus struggled on with what was left of his army, Crassus in hot pursuit. In a desperate bid to gain the upper hand, Spartacus turned and attacked him at the river Siler. He killed his own horse to show his men there could be no retreat. The fighting was heavy, but the outcome was never in doubt. Spartacus made straight for Crassus and killed 2 of his centurions before he was cut down himself. The slave army no longer had the numbers to overwhelm the discipline of the legions. The remaining 35,000 rebels were defeated. The body of Spartacus was never found. Around 5,000 slaves escaped, but they ran straight into Pompey's army, which had just arrived from Spain. They were all killed or captured.
Pompey was one of these men who could sniff out a bit of glory from a long distance. And although he really didn't take part in the decisive battle, he did capture about 5,000 of the runaway slaves and put them to death. And he got to Rome and took credit for the whole victory.
Crassus was furious.
What Pompey did was to attempt to steal the glory from Crassus by making out that but for him, the Spartacus rebellion would have continued.
For this and his victories in Spain, Pompey was given a full triumphal procession. But Crassus was only given an ovation, a lesser honor, for his victory had merely been over slaves. But he made sure Rome would remember him. He had captured 6,000 slaves and gladiators alive. Now he used them to underline his victory. This is the Via Appia, the main road into Rome. Crassus had all 6,000 men crucified and their crosses placed at 40-yard intervals along the roadside. The bodies were never taken down. For years afterwards, all travelers along this road could see the revenge of Rome. But nothing could destroy the memory of Spartacus, the gladiator who led slaves against their masters and became a symbol for resistance that still endures today.